Chapter 6. Are you insane like me? The five Wonderbolts gathered outside once most all the commotion had died down. The police and some other Pegasi were still there. They stood in a circle like normal, but it was silent. Every pony was looking at the ground, shifting, and they were all droopy. Spitfire gazed at all of them, moving from one member to the next. What sick-minded pony would do that to such a nice pony? To any pony! Soren finally broke the silence. His head was down, and he was staring at the ground as he spoke. He lifted his head up and puffed his chest out in anger. Come on, this isn't just some minor injury. A pony died. No, a pony was murdered, he said, stomping his hoof. All but Spitfire and Rainbow looked at him in shock. Soren, you need to calm down. We don't know what Spitfire starts. No, she was murdered. It's obvious. You don't leave fine and just show up hung to the ceiling, he shouts, pinning his ears back. Spitfire looked at him with a blank stare before clearing her throat. Alright, it is clear we are all a little shocked, she started, looking at the group. Rainbow had a smirk on her face. Spitfire paused on the blue mare and narrowed her eyes slightly. And we all need a distraction. This has set us off a little bit, so we will skip right after practice. Spitfire walked through the circle and took off, causing the manes of the others to blow in the wind. The others followed her, and Rainbow looked at Soren from the corner of her eye. We can't have that attitude now, can we? Some pony with that attitude would go looking for clues, Rainbow thought. Everyone was flying slower, especially Soren. Come on, every pony. I expect speed, come on. Spitfire demands, with agitation laced in her voice. Rainbow kept a close eye on Soren all day. She watched as he pinned his ears at Spitfire and glared at her all day. Obviously upset, she wasn't more worried. They landed and every pony had gone and it looked normal. The area was still taped off, but Silver Lining was gone. The team enters through the other hallway, avoiding the one where it happened. The locker room was silent, except for the opening and closing of lockers, hoof steps, and snorts. Rainbow's locker was next to Soren's, a few lockers down. Soren's locker was in the corner of the locker room. Perfect. Rainbow watched him from the corner of her eyes as he sat, barely changing. She heard the door shut and looked around. Only Soren and Rainbow were left in the locker room, alone. Spitfire is an idiot, he muttered, not paying attention to Rainbow. She walked up behind him, and before she did anything, he glanced at her, jumping when he saw her about to hit him in the back of the head. What in Celestia's name are you doing? He yells, moving right as her back legs hit the lockers, leaving a dent in the door. She growled and turned towards him. Stay still and let me kill you swiftly, Rainbow growls, her muzzle scrunched in a snarl and her pupils turned to pinholes. Rainbow, what the hell is wrong with you? He said, pushing the mare off. She fell to the ground and growled, jumping up and lunging at him. He swerves and flaps his wings, half jumping, half flying away. She slammed into the locker and growled. Soren landed behind her and headed for the door. Rainbow sped in front of the door, blocking his way and locking it. Blood was running down her head and from her wings. The smell of burning flesh was thick in the air. She unfolded her wings and was in a hunched-over position. She started chuckling, looking at the other pony. Rainbow, what the hell happened to you? He shouted. Heading back to the other end of the locker room, she laughed and screeched at his confusion. I'm nuts. Maybe I'm gone. I'm insane, Soren, she lets out with a whispery tone. Rainbow takes off in the air and slams down next to Soren, trying to hit his head. He dodged her and flew himself. She looked up at him and growled. He looked around, trying to figure out how to get away. He was breathing heavily and his hair was a mess. He looked back at Rainbow and she was gone. His eyes grew huge and he looked up, being met with a hoof to the face. The strong mare's legs sent him backwards into the wall, into the ground. He tried to get up, but she had done some damage and it was hard to move. She landed right next to his head and he looked at her. His face was full of horror and he was confused. Blood was coming from the back of his head and his nose. He scrunched his nose at the smell of burning flesh. Rainbow, why? He got out of his chest, heaving up and down. She bent down, meeting his gaze. Because I couldn't have you investigating where you don't belong. Tell Silver Lining I said hi, she cackles, and he looks at her in horror. He tries to move, but she puts a hoof on his back, holding him down. He pushed, but he had fractured his elbow. When he made contact with the wall, it hurt. Bye-bye, Soren, she said, rearing back and bringing her hoofs back down on his back and head. He screams as they hear a crack and blood starts running down his head, where her hoof landed. He shrieks as she rears back again, coming back down harder. His back breaks and his body goes limp. The sound of his skull breaking rang through the room. She comes down on his head once more, spraying blood, skull shards, and pieces of brain matter on the wall and surrounding lockers. She steps back, her chest heaving. She smiled at her work as the blood puddle started to form. She brings one of her bloody brain matter covered hooves up to her mouth and licks it. Smiling at the taste, she licks her lips. She walks out of the locker room, leaving the pony behind, and takes off. She gets home and washes what blood she has on her off her hooves. The blood had stained her fur, and shards from his skull had lodged into her frog and split her hoof. She wrapped her hooves with bandages up to her knees so that the stained fur and split hoof were covered. The next morning, they all gathered up front, and Spitfire made sure every pony was fine. Spitfire watched as each showed up. She looked at Rainbow's hooves, wondering why they were wrapped. Crash, why are your legs wrapped? I split my hoof yesterday, she replied, flicking her tail. Spitfire looks at her skeptically, but moves on. Where is Soren? She demands, looking at the other three. They shrugged, but Fleetfoot stepped forward. He was pretty upset yesterday, so maybe he stayed home? We don't want a late start practice again, so let's go, she said. Heading towards the locker room. It was silent in the hall, except for the sound of hooves. Clip, clop, clip, clop. Spitfire stopped, opening her wings to stop the others. She sniffed the air and scrunched her nose. You smell that? She asked the others. They nod their heads, and she rushes to the door. She slams it open and gasps at the sight of blood and brain matter sprayed everywhere, and the dead Soren laying on the floor with his head smashed in. The others gathered behind her, and she pinned her ears. Everyone out, she shouts, and backs up out of the room herself. Go home, I'll call the police. I don't know why, but some pony is after the Wonderbolt, she says in a demanding tone. Everyone gladly left and went home. They all locked their doors except Rainbow. She just sat, laughing. Breaking news, every pony. Just one day after the tragic accident with the Wonderbolt's team member Silver Lining, Soren, the co-captain of the Wonderbolts, was found dead early this morning. The police have confirmed that these two ponies were murdered. They found an orange mane hair at both of the crime scenes, and some are wondering if it's one of the teammates. Ponies are starting to wonder if they are safe, and why is some pony going after the Wonderbolts? Till next time, stay tuned, every pony. And that, ladies and gentlemen, wraps up Chapter 6. To be honest, I am quite surprised that she decided to take Soren out, but you don't want anyone to be too suspicious and start investigating things, because once people start getting suspicious, stuff starts to crumble. But it is what it is. Anyways, thank you everyone for tuning in. Like, comment, subscribe your thoughts on who could potentially be next in Rainbow Dash's massacre. Till next time, shine bright my stars, and deuces.